Hello, my beautiful doves. My name is Mina. Welcome back to my channel. On this channel, we talk about fashion and culture. And this video for today is going to be on Victoria's Secret. I wanted to do a video on Victoria's Secret because Hulu released a new mini docu-series in July called Victoria's Secret: Angels and Demons. And of course I watched it because if you guys don't know, Victoria's Secret is a massive underwear lingerie company, and they were particularly dominant in the 90s and early 2000s. They're still around now. Honestly, even into the 2010s. Okay, anyways, the documentary mostly focuses on Les Wexner and Jeffrey Epstein. Les Wexner was the former CEO and founder of L Brands, which owned Victoria's Secret, Abercrombie & Fitch, Express, and Bath & Body Works. And Jeffrey Epstein was Les's close friend for years. So I don't know. I don't know what I was expecting. It wasn't good. Like, I wasn't expecting really a true crime doc, but that's kind of what they lean towards. But anyways, I was inspired by this documentary to do my own little investigative journalism on Victoria's Secret, and I thought I would make a video sharing with you all what I found, including the rise of Victoria's Secret, the fall, the scandals, and where they are now situated in the greater lingerie industry. Before we get into the appeal of Victoria's Secret, I thought maybe we could get into the appeal of lingerie as a whole. So I guess we should define lingerie first. I mean, to be honest, I feel like everyone has their own definition when it comes to clothing terms, especially if they're from different regions of the world. For example, in the US, a lot of people refer to the term underwear as meaning only the bottom, so briefs, thongs, etc. In the UK, a lot of people consider underwear to also mean bras, so bras and bottoms. And on a lot of online retailer sites, they kind of just use the categorical term lingerie to be the all-encompassing term for the underwear that they sell at that store. For me personally, I associate lingerie with fancier undergarments, so garments with lace detailing or bow detailing, or garments that are made of satin or silk or some other luxurious feeling fiber. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to use underwear as like the catch-all term for all undergarments, which will include briefs, bras, corsets, like etc., and lingerie as a fancy subsect of the underwear heading. Does that make sense? So for much of underwear's history, it's fulfilled three major purposes, I would say: modesty, functionality, and fashion. Modesty is the most obvious one. In the 18th century, if you weren't wearing stays or corsets, you were considered to be a loose, immoral woman, which is why I think it's really annoying in period dramas where the costume designer purposely excludes these support garments in the name of feminism. Because it's a very 21st century idea to like look back at these garments and be like, oh, they were extremely oppressive. But women who were living in that time didn't think that. It wasn't considered feminism back then to get rid of your corset. You were just like weird. People thought you were weird. As for functionality, an example I can think of is before laundromats, the way people would launder clothing was through this very intensive, straining process of like washing clothes like this. There's a lot of like historical reenactor informational clips that you can find on YouTube about how people washed clothes in that time, but it's a lot of work. So in saying this, it didn't make sense for people to wash their like nice silk dresses or even their like thick wool jackets every single time after they wore them, because one, you'd probably damage the fibers, and two, it's also just a lot of work. To combat this, men and women would wear underclothes like shifts and petticoats that were usually made of linen or cotton and could be more easily washed. These clothes acted as a sort of sweat barrier between the skin and your outer clothes. And then, of course, for fashion, a lot of these like support undergarments would help shape the body into the fashionable silhouette of the time period. In the 19th century, we had bustles and corsets, and even in the 16th century, women wore farthingales and bodies, later known as stays. Looking at undergarments from a 21st century perspective, a lot of feminists will say that garments like the corset or the wonder bra are oppressive because they mold a woman's body to fit this like standard of beauty that was created by the patriarchy. I think it's true, but also like not fully true, because at the same time, if you have like a naturally larger bust and you're not wearing any kind of support for it, like you're gonna have back issues. So I don't think bras are the be all end all, like evil force of the world. But with that said, the way that they've been marketed in history usually doesn't focus on the comfort aspect. It usually focuses on the let's get a man aspect. For example, in 1994, Playtex Wonder Bra ads featured model Eva Herzigova wearing a push-up bra, showing how a bust can be shaped and then objectified to fit social imperatives around sexiness. The ad slogan also is "Hello Boys," indicating that modifying the bust shape is ultimately for the benefit of men. Another example. H. Addison wrote this 2008 opinion piece for The Times titled "British Women Are Pants at Buying Underwear." I'm going to read an excerpt from it. Gray, saggy knickers, holey vests, and fraying bra straps sound familiar? If your knicker drawer is more Bridget Jones than Eva Herzigova, it seems that you're not alone. According to a survey, only a third of women bother to push the boat out and match their knickers to their bra, and more than half venture no further than Marks & Spencer for their undies, with a third admitting to being seduced by the power of the practical but unimaginative multi-pack. So Addison seems really concerned by the fact that women out there are buying underwear for functional purposes over aesthetic ones. And the language he uses is really darn passive-aggressive, like, only 1/3 of women will buy matching bras and knickers? The article ends with this quote. All in all, the nation's knicker drawer has never looked unlovelier. Not so much hello boys as not tonight, darlings. I mean, it's pretty disgusting to read that now, especially, but that was like the rhetoric that went around for years, especially in the 90s and 2000s. It's like, you want to impress your man? Buy a nice, expensive pair of underwear. Of course, some women have also argued that wearing lingerie is for them and that they'll even like wear it when they're alone, when no one else is watching. And they'll say like, how can this be a patriarchal construct if I'm enjoying it? So not to drag panopticon theory into this, but panopticon theory was like the only thing I retained from my multi-thousand tuition in college. So we're gonna bring it in. Basically, a panopticon is a prison structure that features a guard tower in the middle. The guard is able to see every prison cell that surrounds it. Meanwhile, the inmates can't see the guard and have to assume they're always being watched. Hypothetically, this means they are behaving themselves constantly. In the 1970s, French intellectual Michel Foucault thought the panopticon was a relevant symbol of social control and how it functions in our society. People will watch their own behavior because they've internalized this idea that they're always being watched. This is called self-surveillance. So, some feminist scholars will argue that women have internalized these societal messages about how to behave as a woman, and that's why they feel good wearing lingerie. By practicing patriarchal ideals of femininity in their own bedrooms, they are engaging in self-surveillance. I don't know necessarily if I fully agree with that. I think it's all true to a certain extent because gender roles are like taught to us from a young age. Like you can't really separate gender from societal constructs. But at the same time, like, I totally understand the appeal. Like, I love lingerie. For a long time, I wanted to have my own lingerie brand. So I get it. I'm not shitting on anyone who enjoys lingerie for themselves. This is just like the argument that's been laid on the table by academics. But let's get into the origins of Victoria's Secret. In 1977, Roy Raymond opened up the first Victoria's Secret store in a Palo Alto, California mall. He wanted to create a comfortable space for men to buy lingerie for their wives. And he came up with this idea because he was looking for some lingerie for his own wife in the department store I. Magnin, but felt extremely awkward and uncomfortable and assumed other men probably felt the same way. So he came up with this idea to offer them a more intimate and cozy and relaxing space to buy luxury goods for their girlfriends and wives. He told a Vogue reporter that the original stores were designed to make men feel comfortable, so he used dusty rose and dark wood, private, fanciful, a little bit sexy. He then started up a mail order catalog tied to the business where people could place orders over the phone. Then in 1982, retail mogul Les Wexner, who we talked about a little bit earlier, Les founded The Limited, and his company bought Victoria's Secret, which had grown to 6 stores by then, for $4 million. And he pretty much rejected Roy's original idea. According to Dan Finkelman, senior vice president at Intimate Brands, Wexner geared his strategy towards women because he believed that women had more buying power in this particular industry.
All the women I know wear underwear most of the time. All of the women I know would like to wear lingerie all of the time.
Finkelman adds, if we gave women a chance to feel sexy in a wonderful romantic environment, they prefer that than going to a mass merchant to buy a 3-pack. Victoria's Secret did hang on to this European glamour for a while now. Sure, the new VS updated the colors, patterns, and styles of their garments, but they still wanted to maintain this upscale snobbery, which separated them from their competitor Friedrichs of Hollywood, which was stereotyped as being trashy and raunchy. As part of this upper-class charade, VS put in their magazines that their headquarters were London, when really they were based in Ohio. And when the mail order catalog was still running, the automated message when you called their number was this English woman speaking seductively, "Hello, and thank you for calling the Victoria's Secret Catalog Sales Center." Sorry, that's the best I can do. Similarly, on television for decades, Victoria's Secret ads would be narrated by an unseen woman with an English accent.
Victoria's Secret introduces the world's most advanced bra, Body by Victoria Ipex. The revolutionary new Body by Victoria Ipex comes to Victoria's Secret March 1st.
The vibe ended up shifting, though, at the turn of the century. In the late 90s, there was this rise of sex and kitsch in the fashion industry. For example, Tom Ford had a breakthrough collection with Gucci in 1996, which married the irony of kitsch to luxury materials. Sex and the City premiered in 1998, covering taboo topics in ways never seen before on television. And then, of course, the leaking of Paris Hilton's tape.
The idea of sexuality and what was sexy during the 2000s was really a radical and fast change. There was all this romance about the original muse, Victoria, how smart, educated, and well-raised that she was.
That projects normal kind of woman who likes to feel beautiful, nothing sleazy.
And that was just not resonating anymore.
So, at the turn of the century, Victoria's Secret models transformed from the minimal makeup high-class socialite to the heavily made-up and scantily dressed angels. The term angel comes from a commercial they did in 1997, featuring Stephanie Seymour and Tyra Banks to run its angel underwear collection. And the name stuck to mean any model or ambassador working for Victoria's Secret. In 1995, Wexner and his chief marketing officer, Ed Razek, decided to host a fashion show, which was an annual tradition until 2018. In the early days, it wasn't televised, but in 1999, they paid for ad space during the Super Bowl to promote the live stream of that year's Victoria's Secret show, which ended up drawing in so many viewers that the website crashed. The fashion show has since been broadcast in more than 100 countries and helped drive up almost $7 billion in annual sales. Not too shabby. Over time, it also became more lavish, with celebrity music artists performing like Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande, Lady Gaga, and The Weeknd. In 2000, Gisele Bündchen wore the most expensive item of lingerie ever created at the time, a $15 million diamond and ruby encrusted fantasy bra. The show also became more camp, with models wearing abstract outfits that you couldn't buy in stores.
One of the truisms of show business is that corny can work, and the wings were corny, and yet the press loved it, the audience at the shows loved it, and they worked like crazy.
And due to the publicity of this event and how much money VS poured into it every single year, it became a very aspirational job for models to get.
The angels.
Ivan Bart, president of IMG Models, said it was highly legitimate. A model would do their high fashion editorial, their runway, an ad campaign, and Victoria's Secret.
I think Victoria's Secret is like the most important. I think that's what girls want to do when they turn to a model and they come to America. That's what they want to reach.
But at the same time of all this success, Victoria's Secret was also, behind closed doors, a breeding ground for misogyny and abuse. For example, in 2001, the VS fashion show was hosted by actor Rupert Everett, who leaned on some misogynistic quips. For example, in the broadcast, he says,
"Security is tight and so are the girls."
And then later, after warning viewers to
lock your wives or girlfriends in the attic,
he takes us on a virtual tour of Heidi Klum's body, even rubbing his face up and down her leg. Like literal jail. Jail for him, please.
as I kiss my way up her legs, I'm not thinking. What am I thinking? The hair! Don't worry, Heidi, I've got my tweezers in my makeup bag.
The models themselves also got smaller. One study I read measured the physical body attributes of Victoria's Secret models from 1995 to 2018. They found that model bust, waist, and hip measurements decreased from 32.9, 24.7, and 34.9 inches in the 90s to 32, 23.6, and 34.4 inches in 2015 to 2018. And this is really interesting because over the last 21 years, the average size of the American woman has actually increased. So the math is not mathing. Also, if you guys remember what the 90s and early 2000s was like, dieting culture was huge. It was mentioned in virtually every chick flick, every rom-com, every magazine. People were going crazy over celebrity diets and just like the idea of losing weight. And because of this rhetoric going around in society, I feel like no one batted an eye when Victoria's Secret models came forward in interviews and etc. explaining their dieting regimens before the shows. And to make things worse, Victoria's Secret execs and PR even encouraged it, made these diets seem aspirational for any kind of aspiring model. For example, model Adriana Lima talked about how she would phase out solid food for days before the fashion show and not even drink water 12 hours before showtime. That just doesn't sound healthy. That sounds actually incredibly dangerous, especially to restrict yourself from drinking water. Water! And in 2015, Ed Razek boldly told Forbes that when one model asked him why she wasn't cast one year, he said that while she was Instagramming from nightclubs, Adriana Lima was jumping rope for 3 hours. Around 2018, the tide was really starting to shift in the fashion industry when it came to diversity casting and representation politics. So when Vogue interviewed Ed Razek about whether or not Victoria's Secret was planning to diversify their casting for their upcoming shows, he said that he had actually no interest in hiring plus size or transgender models. He told Vogue, "If you're asking if we've considered putting a transgender model in the show or looking at putting a plus size model in the show, we have. We invented the plus size model show in what was our sister division, Lane Bryant. Lane Bryant still sells plus size lingerie, but it sells a specific range just like every specialty retailer in the world sells a range of clothing. As do we. We market to who we sell to and we don't market to the whole world." He also added, "So it's why don't you do 50? By the way, here he's talking about the size range available at VS, which at the time was 30A to 40 DDD. Why don't you do 60? Why don't you do 24? It's like, why doesn't your show do this? Shouldn't you have transsexuals in the show? No, I don't think we should. Well, why not? Because the show is a fantasy. Yikes. Like, I can't even believe he had the audacity to say that in an interview. And of course he got like completely flamed for it, as he should, as he fucking should be. But it's just like so disgusting that you would be, one, like that you would even like think that in the first place, but two, feel so shameless about it that you would openly and brazenly talk about it in a huge magazine that a lot of people read. But of course, the misogyny did not just stop at the modeling side of the company. No. Victoria's Secret released its infamous The Perfect Body campaign in 2014 to promote their new body lingerie collection, but the models all looked the same in the ad, implying that only a light-skinned, thin woman had the ideal body. The campaign got a ton of backlash, with several petitions going around telling Victoria's Secret they needed to cut down that campaign because the messaging was harmful. Eventually, VS did change the slogan to a body for everybody, but the poster of the 10 identical models stayed the same. Arguably more dangerous than Victoria's Secret is their brand aimed for teenagers called Pink. Pink was introduced in 2002 for girls ages 15 to 22, and usually, if you remember the mall layout, the Victoria's Secret store would be like this side of the mall, like this side of a store, and then Pink would be like right next to it, and you could kind of go back and forth. There was no real like wall separating the two stores, at least in my hometown. In 2013, Pink launched a marketing campaign called Bright Young Things. Other than the fact that the collection was just plain ugly, it also featured garments with pretty salacious slogans like "I dare you" on the back of lacy underwear. There's also a low neckline t-shirt that said "Enjoy the view" and a pink and orange thong that said "Call me" on the crotch. Let's remember, these products were aimed towards children. Maybe my mom was right not letting me shop at Pink. In terms of scandals, though, we've literally just dipped our pinky toes into the kiddie pool because, as I said earlier in the video, Wessner was besties with Jeffrey Epstein. But that's not all. Jeff also allegedly used his connection to Les to recruit young women to be models for Victoria's Secret. But it was really just like a scam where he would allegedly assault said women when he had them audition at his mansion. All allegedly, of course. Like, I have to use the word allegedly for legal issues, but trust, I am a believer. So yeah, he told women and young girls that he was a modeling scout at Victoria's Secret despite having no such position. And according to model actress Alicia Arden, this was exactly how Epstein lured her to a Santa Monica hotel room and assaulted her in 1997. Maria Farmer, who worked at the door at Epstein's New York mansion, also told The New Yorker that all these young girls would go in and out of that mansion for auditions for Victoria's Secret, and a lot of them were pretty young because they would show up wearing their school uniforms still. One anonymous woman testified of the experience. "I'd spent all of my savings getting Victoria's Secret lingerie to prepare for what I thought would be my audition, but instead it seemed like a casting call for prostitution. I felt like I was in hell." Executives claim that they did tell Les that this was happening in the mid-90s, but he just like ignored the problem, continued to be friends with Epstein, and then even gave Epstein like his mansion in New York in 1998. Even when Wexner allegedly severed his ties with Epstein finally in 2007, Victoria's Secret continued to work with MC2 Model Management, an agency whose owner, Jean-Luc Brunel, has been accused of operating a trafficking operation for wealthy men. Disgusting. Ed Razek was also in a number of scandals himself. Models have come forward about how he would like harass them, like verbally, but then also physically as well. Like he would try to kiss them, try to grope them, try to get them to sit on his lap. Just like crusty, disgusting behavior. And what's worse is because he was top dog at VS, like a lot of people were afraid to speak out about it.
Ed's assistant made a comment. She said, "If I had $1 for every time a sexual harassment case came across my email, I'd be rich." And like Ed laughed, other people laughed, and it was just like, I felt really awkward, but I also laughed. And it was just like this very normal thing to make a joke like that.
One model, Andy Muse, said that in 2007, she was 19 at the time, and Razik had invited her to dinner. On the way to the restaurant, he tried to kiss her. She denied, and he persisted. And then for months, he sent her intimate emails and even suggested they move in together in his house in Turks and Caicos. She tried to remain polite to protect her career, but then when he asked her to come to his home in New York for dinner, she skipped out on it because being alone at his house understandably made her very uncomfortable. Soon after, she found out for the first time in 4 years, VS did not pick her for the 2008 fashion show. Coincidence? I really don't think so. And then, of course, Victoria's Secret is a fast fashion brand. It was owned by L Brands for the majority of its timeline, and L Brands has sweatshops in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Jordan. And in the 90s, Victoria's Secret also used prison labor as well. There was an episode on the show Orange is the New Black, which is a comedy drama about this woman who was sentenced to prison for 15 months because her ex-girlfriend was a drug runner and she was pulled into it somehow. It's honestly been a really long time since I watched it, and I think I only watched like the first 3 seasons, which usually happens for me. I don't know if this is what everyone else does too, where it's really hard to continue watching a show after 3 seasons. Like that's kind of when I cut off for every single show, except for Mad Men. But I do remember reading or hearing about this one episode that was in the show where they have the girls sewing lingerie for a brand called Whispers, which is clearly a reference to Victoria's Secret. Moreover, the brand lacks transparency and accountability. It received 21 to 30% in the Fashion Transparency Index with no evidence of fair wage along its supply chain. They were also under severe speculation when Greenpeace found a high level of phthalates in their fabrics. The problem with phthalates is that they cause hormone imbalances and are considered highly toxic. In 2018, brand insights from YouGov showed that women's perception of Victoria's Secret has declined since 2013. According to the site, the brand has found itself caught up in the Me Too moment. Its annual fashion show, featuring its famous angels, aired only a month after allegations of sexual harassment came out against Harvey Weinstein. The show saw its television ratings sink 30%. Between 2015 and 2018, sales also began to falter, in part because more body-positive underwear brands such as Aerie, Third Love, and Lively cropped up, taking market share. And between 2016 and 2018, VS's market share in the US dropped from 33% to 24%. Boo-hoo. You know, people were tired of Victoria's Secret's antics by this point, especially during the Me Too movement, but people were also fed up with their sizing systems. Once again, the brand has offered cup sizes up to triple D, but that's actually not that big of a size. Courtney Kilpack, an award-winning bra specialist with Nordstrom's, explained, there's over 19 cup sizes and VS only carries 7, and there's over 10 band sizes and VS only carries 6. At the start of 2019, activist shareholder Barrington Capital sent a letter to Wexner recommending ways to improve growth at Victoria's Secret. In the letter, Barrington's CEO, James A. Mittler-Rotonda, wrote, Victoria's Secret's brand image is starting to appear to many as being outdated and even a bit tone-deaf by failing to be aligned with women's evolving attitudes towards beauty, diversity, and inclusion. Hear, hear, James. After receiving that letter, it seemed like Victoria's Secret tried to take some steps in the right direction. They appointed 2 new female board directors and introduced model Barbara Palvin, who was not plus size, but definitely a step away from the 23-inch models of VS's past, as well as transgender model Valentina Sampaio. Coincidentally, the same day that Valentina shared a photo of herself on Instagram tagging #VSPink, Wexner announced that Razik was resigning in a memo sent out to employees. And in November 2019, the company confirmed they had officially canceled the VS runway show. The biggest PR move, though, is that in 2021, Victoria's Secret launched their newest campaign, pivoting from the Angels to the VS Collective, a group of entrepreneurs and activists that includes Megan Rapinoe, a pro soccer player and gender equity campaigner, Maylyn Co, the Olympic gold medalist skier, Paloma El Cesar, a plus-size biracial model and inclusivity advocate, and Priyanka Chopra Jones, an Indian actress and tech investor. Martin Waters, the new chief executive of Victoria's Secret, said, "We needed to stop being about what men want and to be about what women want." Finally! It only took you 30 years to get here. The VS Collective is supposed to advise the brand, promote the brand, speak for the brand, collab with the brand. They're kind of like, they're ambassadors. Like, they are not just models. Like, they're supposed to be more involved in the process of branding. The company has also done an internal haul. So there's a new executive team, a new board of directors. And because the company went public, they split from L Brands. So they're not even connected to Wexner anymore. Store mannequins also come in new shapes and sizes, and the Angels imagery was phased out. The company also expanded its production selection to include sportswear. And for the first time, Victoria's Secret introduced a Mother's Day campaign in May 2021, which featured a pregnant model and began selling nursing bras. While these are like some pretty good developments, there are some things that still need to change. For example, Victoria's Secret still does not have a plus size line. Their current sizes for swimwear and sportswear only go up to XXL. To put into perspective, competitors like Good American offer a plus size range that starts at 2XL, and a swimwear brand called Nomads offers sizing up to 4X. Founder of Nomads, Taylor Long, shares her critique. When a brand like Victoria's Secret uses deceptive marketing tactics, not only are they tokenizing the plus-size models they use, they're also deceiving their customers. Victoria's Secret is one of the many brands that are trying to capitalize on the size inclusion movement without doing any of the hard work, which would include designing, producing, and carrying plus sizes in their store. If smaller brands with much smaller budgets can design and produce inclusive styles and size ranges, then there's absolutely no reason why Victoria's Secret can't. And then, of course, they're still ranked not good enough on the website Good On You, which does research and ranks corporate brands on their ethics and sustainability. They write on the website, Victoria's Secret has few eco-friendly materials in its collection, which is why its rating is not good enough. We found no evidence the brand has a policy to minimize the impacts of microplastics or minimize textile waste when manufacturing its products. Victoria's Secret, along with many other big-name brands, signed up to Greenpeace's Detox My Fashion program back in 2011 and had set a deadline to eliminate hazardous chemicals by 2020. Unfortunately, 2020 has come and gone, and there's no evidence it's met its target. VS's labor standards are also ranked not good enough because none of its supply chain is certified by labor standards. Now, I could not end this video without talking about Savage X Fenty, which has become the new big lingerie retailer. They even had their own runway show for the first time in collaboration with Amazon Prime, the same year that Victoria's Secret axed theirs, which of course spurred a lot of comparisons. But whereas VS was all about the traditional runway with skinny models wearing barely anything strutting down a catwalk with musical performances in the backdrop, Savage X Fenty's show was a performance, featuring Rihanna, the founder of the brand, and other lingerie-clad models performing dance numbers on top of futuristic cubes. Savage X Fenty also featured a diverse cast of models, including Slick Woods, Isis King, Laverne Cox, and Paloma El Cesar. Probably also because Rihanna is a Black woman who has talked about social issues in the past, people believe her desire for inclusivity comes from a more authentic place, whereas Victoria's Secret, unfortunately, reads as a PR move no matter how many ways you slice it. And unlike VS, which touted super strict regimens and dieting, the Savage X Fenty models talk about things like eating chicken nuggets with barbecue sauce. As Ariana De Valentina writes, becoming a Victoria's Secret angel is something that would-be customers are supposed to aspire to rather than identify with. Meanwhile, Savage X Fenty targets potential customers by resonating with who they are and what they like, not who it thinks they should want to be. Victoria's Secret created this celebrity culture around its models, in part because I think they tried to get this legitimacy in the high fashion world. This worked for a long time because honestly, people had like a really big fixation on models back in the day, specifically in the 90s and 2000s.
Victoria's Secret really understood, we're very hungry as a culture for beauty and beautiful people, and they just sort of fed us what we all wanted.
Supermodels had almost gone to the next level and became these kind of celebrities. They weren't even supermodels anymore. They became something else.
I think nowadays, though, the reason that tide has turned is because we've just become so much more aware of what the modeling industry demands from models, and it's actually not as glamorous as these Vogue outtakes used to make it seem like. We keep hearing about these awful dieting regimes and these awful exercising regimes and the plastic surgery that models are pressured to get, and the way that they age out the industry and the way that they're abused by designers or casting directors or agencies. The curtain has just been lifted, and I think the mystique of the fashion model has died with it. Of course, there are still people who aspire to be models. There are always going to be, but it's just not the same as it used to be.
Years later, you hear, I hear from agents, oh, we all knew he did this, and we all know she did that, and but we just turned our heads because we made so much money. I was kind of shattered myself to think like, wow, I can't believe you knew you were sending models to these people and, just hoping that something wouldn't happen. It was really, the complicity was shocking.
But at the same time, Fenty is not perfect. They offer a VIP membership subscription service, which is $50 a month. A lot of people on the internet have complained about signing up for it without realizing, because the site's UX is really confusing. And then they got all these charges and they're like, what the fuck? It just doesn't even sound like a good idea. I don't know why anyone would willingly sign up for it anyway, because most people would not spend $50 a month on underwear. Also on Good On You, Savage X Fenty is ranked the lowest ranking, which is we avoid, because the company offers no transparency about any of their practices. And then, of course, synthetic fabrics are also used, like polyester, and synthetic fabrics are not biodegradable. They can take hundreds of years to break down. And even when you're washing them, they bleed microplastics into the water and kill marine life. So much to consider here for the future of the underwear industry. If you want to know what I recommend, I personally really like Nikki for basic underwear. They're climate neutral, incredibly breathable, and honestly, they do run a little bit pricier for underwear, for basic underwear, but I find that it's totally worth it because I wear mine so often and they're in still amazing condition compared to all the underwear that I have bought from Uniqlo or Target in my lifetime that have gotten holes within the first year or 6 months of wearing. I don't wear bras also, so I can't really comment on good bra brands, but in general, my main rule for underwear is to look for organic cotton as the fabric, especially in the gusset region. Do not wear polyester in the gusset region of the underwear, please. And for sustainable fancy lingerie, I'll put some links in the description of some options. I haven't bought from a lot of them because I don't spend that much money on lingerie. I don't really buy lingerie that often. So I don't know. I can't personally testify for them, but these are brands that have been recommended to me. I think at the end of the day, Victoria's Secret is moving in the right direction. They're definitely slower than everyone else, but they're moving at least. But then, of course, I also think that any fast fashion brand that builds its brand image on empowering women is contradictory, because at the same time you're saying all this women stuff, you have poor women in the global south dying over making these clothes for 2 cents a day. So once again, the math is not mathing. Okay, so that's all I have for today's video. Please let me know in the comments what you think about Victoria's Secret, what you think about Savage X Fenty. If you have any underwear or lingerie brand recommendations that you personally love that are also on the sustainable side, I would love to hear those things because I'm always on the lookout. And yeah, I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.